think so.
Okay. We'll get more and more ready as we go.
Yeah.
Well, Sister Fay, thank you for being here again. And I'd like to continue some of the conversations that we had earlier and some of the developments that came out of your own presentation last night. One of the things that I'd like to ask you to think out loud about is this matter of the inner guides that you believe that all of us have, and that you certainly have, and that you often characterize as my spirit. In the world of traditional religion and faith, people talk about ways in which they develop that inner spirit. And they call that very often the use of spiritual disciplines. Sometimes it's prayer, sometimes it's meditation, sometimes it's fasting. It may be a variety of things, but all through human experience, women and men have found different ways to develop the sensitivity they need to listen to and to hear and to follow that inner guide that you speak of. I wonder about you, and as you have lived your life out over these years, and as you have found the inner guide to be so important to you and your development and your work and your life, how do you nurture that inner spirit, as it were? How do you keep yourself, work to keep yourself alive to that spirit and open to that spirit?
It's a hard question.
Okay, you're a hard sister.
Years ago, when I was in my 20s, I explained to my spirit that I didn't feel comfortable being on my knees saying prayer, and that I didn't feel comfortable being in the circumstances that people dictated as being the circumstance you're supposed to be in to experience the Spirit or be blessed by the Spirit or guided by the Spirit. And I told the Spirit, if you let me be my way, then I'll be all right.
Good.
And that I didn't think I had to have a man or a woman tell me how to deal with this spirit for me to deal with it. And so if I was open and could just deal with it the way Fay felt it, that I could deal with it and be comfortable. And I didn't feel like I had to show other people or explain to other people or prove to other people anything. I don't have to bow my head because you bow your head. I don't have to get on my knees because you get on your knees, because it's an individual spirit and it operates with me differently. I say prayers, but I don't say them at nighttime when I go to bed. I say them anytime. I might be walking down the street and say a prayer. I might be thankful for some things that I feel I should be thankful for, and I can deal with it on the bus.
Yes.
So I just didn't want to be categorized or put into a mold because I didn't feel that mold.
Well, there are many people who, even in the midst of very traditional religions, have your kind of experience, where the impulse, say, to give thanks, comes at any given moment, and they just go right into it and let that be the time. Or when they feel a deep sense of need for something internal or external, they go into that. Did you have any experiences like that during the movement days in Alabama?
No, not that I can remember. No.
Okay. So for you, the inner spirit adapts to you and you adapt to the spirit.
That's the way I like to think of it.
Mutuality there.
Yeah, I think there's a way I must deal with situations, a way I must be in order to honor that. I can't lie to the Spirit because the Spirit is me. And then I'd be lying to myself, which wouldn't make any sense. So to me, it's like an honesty. And as long as you're true to yourself, you'll be true to other people.
Yes.
And you'll be true to other circumstances. If you're not true to yourself, if you're pretending or play acting or doing something because other people require you to do it because it makes them feel good or they want to hold you in check, then that's not me.
Do you think that part of what you've done is to practice this being true to yourself, and that itself is a way of building the Spirit in you by trying to keep on that path, that in itself is a kind of what people call spiritual discipline?
I think, yeah, I never, like we talked when we first started, I never talked about it.
Right.
And so I don't really have the words
right. You don't
for
have
it.
to, though.
But I would say yes. Because you want certain things to manifest themselves in your life.
Yes.
And nothing is promised, as your parents teach you when you're a little kid. Nothing is promised to you. The world doesn't owe you anything. You owe the world something. And so those things kind of make sense to me. I know I'm not in charge of anything. I can't move the mountains either. I can't make the water stop flowing. But there are things that I can do that are in my purview.
Yes.
And those are the things I function with. Now, there's some other people maybe can do those things. I'm not one of them.
Right. Do you find any particular kinds of things that you read that can help you stay more steady on this kind of a path?
I think that reading helped me get to the path, helped me understand these variations. And I can't name any particular books, but the kinds of things where you're talking about experiences people have. I think we're learning constantly from other people and other people's experiences. And then you choose the kind of situations that this makes sense to me, this doesn't make sense to me. I remember reading things when I was quite young about people who would do generous things and they wouldn't tell people and they didn't want to be known that they had done it. And they appreciated the fact that they were able to and they did it. And that was all they needed. And that was very interesting to me.
Right. One of the ordinary terms for that kind of spirit is altruism.
Okay.
Doing things just for the good of others without needing to get any notice or any praise yourself. And
you feel like you're getting praise, though. Because
How so?
Well, the praise is not always in the accolades, but the rewards that you get about your health or the clarity of your mind, or being able to think a complete thought, or being able to think a thought.
Right.
When you think about how many people are confused and the fact that you may not think you're confused might be important to you.
That's so good that you mentioned reward in terms of healthiness, spiritual, mental, physical healthiness. Because I read a study some years ago comparing people who were normally associated with doing altruistic kinds of things. And it seemed very, very clear that this had a positive effect on their life and their health.
Really? Okay.
The workings of their body, the workings of their mind, that altruism indeed did bring its own rewards, but as you said, not in terms of the accolades that we usually expect. So you have continued to live this kind of path that you want to be faithful and true to you.
Yeah. If the me was an ugly, what do you call it, avarice, had a lot of avarice, a lot of negative aspects, then I think I would hopefully, I would try to change that
Right.
to be
Right.
this other situation.
Right.
But I don't think I have all of those negatives, and I would try to work with those positives. And sometimes, you know, you don't even recognize what it is that you're doing or what you're working with. And I remember accolades or things come to you in different ways. And I remember a sister saying to me in Atlanta, she said, when I grew up, I want to be like Fay Bellamy. So I said, well, what does that mean? Because she's as grown as I am. She was talking about the fact that we'd had a big discussion and arguments and disagreements at WRFG Radio in Atlanta. And that when we came out of the meeting, I was friendly with the people we had been arguing with. And she didn't understand that.
Yes.
And I told her, I said, well, it didn't make any difference. We're still going to be working with these people. We'll just come back and argue another time. So why would I carry that with me? I'm not mad at them. I hope they're not mad with me. We're still going to be doing this radio station. Let's get on to the next thing. So to carry, for me to carry that as an anger thing is very uncomfortable and it's very heavy. And when you're trying to analyze the anger, it doesn't really make any sense because what are you going to do with it? All it's going to do is get in the way of dealing with the people again. So, and you're not going to get along with everybody, and everybody's not going to get along with you, and that's quite all right.
So you have to keep your own goals in mind and recognize the things that get in the way of reaching those goals and working to those goals.
And I think I learned that through SNCC, through my family, and through dealing with other people, and watching how other people deal with their situations, and you take the parts that you say, hey, that makes sense to me. I can adapt that to my life. So it's not like you're out here by yourself.
Right, and that's where I want to follow up with you. As you think about SNCC, especially in the days of the movement in the South, is there any one person, or are there any one or two persons who you felt you really learned a lot from about this matter of how to live your life? Anybody in the organization who you thought that you simply learned a great deal from?
I don't think any one person. I think there were a variety of people and situations. Because there were so many personalities and so many strengths, and there were so many weaknesses too. But I learned, you know, these people from all over the country and from all kinds of experiences. And I think, I think I learned a lot from them. I learned, first of all, I'd never been in among that many people in a central place at one time who had so much strength of character.
William, we're going to ask you if
can't do
you
that
could
paper.
not do that. Okay.
If you can bring it back in a little bit too, because I can see the corner of it.
Okay. What were we saying?
The many kinds of people that you're working with, and
Okay.
how they came from different places and
Yeah.
brought different kinds of points of view, and the fact that you were able to learn from that variety.
Yeah, it was like really a surprise. You know, what happened in SNCC a lot of times, people seem to come into the organization in mass. For example, you might be working Tuskegee, the field secretaries, organizing on the campus, trying to get the students involved, and maybe they're successful. They get students involved. A number of students say, I want to join SNCC also. I don't want to just be on campus, but I want to come into the organizational system. So I remember when George Ware and Trapp, I can't think, Ernest, what is Ernest's last name? Ernest Stevens, we called him Trapp. Kathleen, I don't remember her maiden name, Kathleen Cleaver, as we know her now. And what's his name? Sammy Young.
Yes.
And another guy called Pinky, whose real name I don't know. They came into SNCC as a group.
Yes.
And they were so dynamic and so intelligent and so interesting and so stimulating. And it was all this one group of people from this one university system.
Yes.
And it taught me, because I'd never gone to college, it taught me what is happening in certain environments of our world that a whole lot of African Americans are not aware of. How dynamic, how many people out there just have such sharp minds, who are thinkers, who are readers, who are creators, who are doers. And that's just one example. George Ware, for example, was one of the sharpest people consistently that I ever met. Just admired his mind. I admired the caliber of his thought and the consistency of his thought. You know, James Foreman, I liked the way he loved to teach. He loved the dialogue. He was so organized in his thoughts. You know, everything was organized. Different women like Ruby Doris, creative, aggressive, energetic, strong, you know, when nobody, you know, people were scared to go talk to men mostly, but she wasn't mean or nasty. She was just so strong that people would like hesitate sometime before approaching her. But she was really a sweet person. She was a good mother, a loving wife, and a strong administrator, and she cared about people. So with that variety, it's just impossible for me to say one person or two people or three people. It was just a mixture of situations.
And it was that mixture itself that was such a great benefit to you then.
Definitely. I couldn't have gotten it in college. I couldn't have gotten it by reading a book. I had to experience it. And so I learned that you had to like step outside your little bailiwick and reach out for other people in other situations, because that's how you keep on growing.
You know, I keep thinking about how much that basic family of yours influenced your life and helped to shape your thinking, your ideals, your commitments. As you have gone on, starting there in the South, moving on to the other kinds of connections that you've made for change, how has that family stayed with you? Do you sort of carry any of them around in any way so that you can almost communicate with them?
Not really, not like that. They stay with me in my thoughts, my memories, but not in that way.
But I think the thoughts and memories are
significant.
Yes, very significant. And I guess, did you ever feel in particularly rough times that some of them were with you?
Oh, I've always felt that I have a base of support. And they might not understand or even care about what I'm doing. They care about me.
Yes.
And I know that I always have a home to go to. If anybody in my family has a place, I have a place. But I'm very independent. And I've never had a need for that, but I've had a need for assistance, and they've given it. And I've given some assistance in return, but not as much because it hasn't been required. But it's always been my hope that if it ever is required, that I'd be able to respond in that kind.
Yes. I'm curious about some of these aunties who, in their own way, were very much church sisters and lived out their life in that context. When you were in the movement, did you have any sense that those church sisters were carrying you in their prayers, in their thoughts? Did you have a sense that they were somehow keeping you in that life of church that they were a part of, and that Fay was still with them, especially down in Alabama?
I never thought about it like that. I never felt it like that. I just always feel my family is with me, period.
Yes.
And circumstances notwithstanding.
Yes.
And that each day is the same for them with me.
Okay.
Because what happens, a lot of people in your families don't understand when you got involved in the movement. They didn't know what the movement was, they didn't care, people not messing with you, don't mess with them, get out their way, you know, be safe, don't go to jail, what are you doing, do you know what you're doing? And so what you find yourself doing is not trying to explain those things, just being yourself with them, and they just accept you. They don't even care about all this other stuff. It's like people will talk about they have a lot of money now. The family doesn't care because the family is about another circumstance in life. They're glad you have the money, though. They hope you use it right. That kind of thing.
Right.
It's just a consistency. But no, I never thought about it or felt it in that kind of way. I just feel that my family is there.
Yes.
And not all people in my family, but a number of them.
Right.
Because all families are not, what do you call it, homogeneous. And everybody is not the same way, but I know there's enough of them that, and for me to feel comfortable with, and that my aunts have me in their prayers each and every day anyway.
Yes.
No matter what's going on.
No matter where you are.
Yeah, no matter what's going on, whether I'm doing something or not doing anything. Because life every day is a challenge.
Yes.
Yeah.
So you need the prayers wherever you are, whenever you can get them. You started out from that family out into the rest of the world because you wanted to work for change. As you were in the movement, and even as you reflect back on it since those Southern Movement days, do you feel that what you were doing there with SNCC was sort of fulfilling that desire and hope that you had from the very beginning to work for change?
I thought it was an introduction. Yes, I definitely thought that. And because like I told you before, I didn't know what form it would come in.
Yes.
I really had no direction that
Right.
I knew to go in. And so happenstance, the steps kept leading, and I ended up there.
Right.
And I think it was a very fortunate circumstance. I think it helped my mind and my thinking, because one of the things about people in SNCC was that they were expansive. Many of them were expansive in their thoughts. Not all of them, but those who knew how were.
Yes.
And when you talk about Stokely, when you talk about Foreman, when you talk about Cortland Cox, when you talk about Ruth Howard, Judy Richardson, Cynthia, when you talk about the Ladners, you're talking about people who didn't just think about their little area of environment or their little area of concern. They felt that it was about the world, and we were all part of it. And so we had to be concerned about the world. And an example was, like I was talking about that Vietnam statement and the anti-war statement. And a lot of people in SNCC said, why are you dealing with that? That don't have anything to do with the movement. That has nothing to do with the South. That has nothing to do with us. But there were many people in SNCC in our meetings, and they won, majority won, saying, but it does have something. And they would explain it to me and to others. And we come to a different understanding after dialogue. And it helped expand your perception of things. That it's not just African people in America, it's people everywhere, poor people, circumstances, abuse, misuse, and how people are doing this thing. And it's not just you here, but you're a part of a larger situation. This is just the way yours is shaped, but you can connect up with this over here. It's shaped somewhat different, but the same results are happening.
Yes. This is a very important part of your experience, and you've mentioned it in a variety of ways, that the movement helped to open up your worldview and expand your way of thinking and seeing things. Can you think of any other ways in which participating in the movement changed you, developed you?
Well, it let me see that my strengths were valuable, even my aggressiveness. I didn't know, as a child, you don't know that you're aggressive or that you have certain kind of strengths or that you will take on certain kind of battles. And I learned that I would battle. I learned that I didn't have a lot of fear about some things. I know I used to go on demonstrations every once in a while just to see what they were like. I didn't realize I was not a nonviolent person. That was very violent sometimes. And so if somebody would come to hit me, I would hit them first, and we would go off into it. So I stopped going on demonstrations because that wasn't what it was supposed to be. If you're going to go on a nonviolent demonstration, then you need to be nonviolent. If you can't deal with that, then do something else. But it's also clear to me in the movement that to learn to respect all aspects, not just take the media's perception of what the movement was, a demonstration, a struggle, a fight, a beatdown, a jailing, or whatever. That it was a combination of people. It was about people who answered the phones. It was about people who raised money to keep the effort going. It was about people who fed you in these communities and didn't have to. It was about people who housed you when they knew their houses could be burned down.
Yes.
It was about people who took a chance because they wanted to make a difference also. And so, like, all kinds of things. It was, you know, so when I talk to people about the movement, I try to tell them, don't just look at the demonstrations, look at the organizations, look at the meetings that took place, so you'll know how to develop an organization. Because if you just look at that so-called glamorous or extraordinary part of it, all you see is one little tiny speck, all you see is the end result. How did the people get from that point, from A to that point in the first place? You know, the people who were secretaries, people who fixed our cars, people who gave us places to meet and didn't charge us, people who would come out to demonstrate about people being locked up and in dire circumstances, or keeping an eye on you, people who were in jail who watched out for you, you know, because they couldn't be in the struggle there, but on the inside, they could make sure nothing happened to you.
Yes. It almost sounds as if we could speak of this as a really profoundly maturing experience for you.
It was my college education.
Yes,
Yeah.
Yes. A very important one, and one that you have continued to try to share with others the way we should with all education. That is great. I was fascinated by what you said about you and discovering the capacity for violence within yourself, which is such an important discovery for us to make and not fool ourselves about who we are and where we are. As you know better than I do, one of the major heated discussions that was going on for a certain time in the movement and certainly in SNCC was this whole matter of how do we look upon this matter of nonviolence? Is it a tactic that we need for successful action, or is it a way of life that we're supposed to live? And people got pretty heated on that one. Were you a participant in those kinds of discussions, and where were you at various points in that kind of discussion? What was your position or point of view?
I never got into that kind of discussion. And I never had any nonviolent training. You know, like a lot of people who were doing it en masse, they would have the training sessions, how you protect yourself and all that kind of stuff. I never had any of that. I was sort of winging it. But so I never really dialogued about it, and nobody ever really dialogued with me about it. One of the things that would happen, though, I remember one time in the state capitol in Atlanta, we had gone down and we were trying to enter the state capitol, and they had state troopers blocking the entryway. And we said, well, this is a public place. We can go in here, too. And we were coming up the steps to the state capitol, and this state trooper raised his club to hit me. And when he raised his club, I remember snatching him. And I remember we went to battling on the steps. And so there was a picture in the paper the next day of these two people just, you couldn't even tell who they were. But there was a flurry up there. And when I came in Pascal's next day, everybody started applauding. And they knew it was me. And I was surprised they knew it was me. Because I didn't know that was me. You know? So people saw things in you sometimes that you don't see in yourself. And they identified them. But nobody ever said anything to me about protecting myself. I remember in the second Selma to Montgomery March, we went across the Edmund Pettus Bridge. And when we got across to the bottom, the state troopers had parked cars, like all the way across the highway. And as far as the eye could see, there were cars just parked. You couldn't squeeze between them. They had parked them so close. And there seemed like be about 5,000 people in the march. And I was up front, and Foreman was telling me, get in the middle, get in the middle. I said, get in the middle for what? He said, you're a woman, and you might get hurt. I said, are you crazy? I live here in this place. I work here. I'm not getting in the middle of anything. Plus, you got all these men up here in the front 55,000 preachers, I'm not getting anywhere. So they get to cross the bridge, and they see all these cars, and so they say, Reverend King says, we're going to all bow down and say our prayers. So everybody gets on their knees. So people in the back see us getting on our knees, they get on their knees. So the line, the snail line, people getting on their knees. Then somebody says a prayer, one person. Then somebody else says a prayer. Then somebody else says a prayer. I said, third prayer. I said, okay. And the state troopers standing here, they're standing here on both sides of you and in front of you. So I said, well, this really doesn't feel comfortable, these troopers over my head with these clubs.
Yes.
I can tolerate being hit maybe, but not from above.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So I just got up, got out of the march, and stood next to the state troopers. Then I remember a couple other people in SNCC got up and got